Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We are just waiting on a few more people to join the webinar. So thank you guys for joining. We're going to give some participants a few more minutes to jump on. So thanks again for joining us. We're gonna have a little bit of silence here, and then once we get everybody give everybody a chance to jump on, we will get started. Hopefully, everybody's doing okay today. We give maybe 1 to 2 more minutes, and then we will get this kicked off. Excited to talk about this today. Super interesting subject that we've done some really good research internally and externally. So hope you guys find some of this content relevant. Hopefully it prompts some questions and some Q&A, and we'll talk about that here when we get started. So I'll just give everybody a few more minutes. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all for joining the call today. This webinar is, as you can see, we're focusing on join the 5% club. So what does that mean? We'll dive into that, talk about some concepts and some relevant subject matters. First, before we get started, my name's Jeff Caton. I am the head of global and commercial operations. With me today, I have Kyrie. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kyrie Vikla. I'm the head of product here at Inbenta. I sit where strategy becomes shipped reality, and I'll bring a unique perspective where I see the gaps that slow businesses down or challenges that prevent them from achieving success. And I'm working with our teams closely to lead them to build dependable AI solutions that provide real measurable results. So I'm really excited to talk to you all today about some of the operating patterns and foundations that are key to deploy and scale AI with confidence.
And so just a quick disclaimer, please feel free to ask questions throughout. And then we'll also have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the webinar. So you can throw your questions up in the Q&A chat at the top. We'll try to get to those. If we do not, don't worry, we will field those at the end. So I just wanted to prompt everybody. We'll be following that. And so we'll go ahead and dive in. Just a quick intro. Before we dive right into this slide, I kind of wanted to give you an intro. Across industries, everyone's experimenting with Gen AI, but few are operationalizing it in a way that creates durable business value. So what we're going to walk through today is not theory. It's what we're seeing succeed in highly regulated, high volume environments. Some of those industries being banking, insurance, healthcare, telecom, and large enterprise organizations overall. Our goal today is simple. It's to show you the operating pattern that separates the organizations who talk about AI from the ones who actually deliver outcomes. They deliver outcomes to their CFOs, their regulators, and obviously customers who rely on them that they can trust. So as we go through the slides, I encourage you, think about one question. What would it mean for you or your organization to treat AI not as a tool, but as an operational discipline? So that's kind of the main theory as we get into the first slide and begin today. And so first, I think one of the biggest misconceptions around AI is that the idea that success is subjective. It isn't. If you can't quantify the impact, such as cost savings, resolution improvements, compliance adherence, productivity, then leadership can't scale that. And so the organizations that succeed, the 5% club that we refer to them, they treat measurement as a design requirement. not something that they try to figure out after deployment. They define the behaviors they expect from AI, the guardrails, and most importantly, I think that the KPIs that prove whether it's delivering actual value, right? That's the main thing. That's why you hear about the 95% that don't succeed. And so this is dividing the line between pilots that stay pilots and pilots that become enterprise programs. And so I'll segment that into Kyrie about measurement and governments and some of the architecture points.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff talked a little bit about the 5% club, and the difference is that they are measuring from day one. And what that really means is you need to commit to three things. One is aligning on what the business problem is that you are trying to solve. If you've ever heard the phrase, a problem well defined is already a solution half solved. So you really need to get to the bottom of what problem you are trying to solve for your business. And that's going to help you define your solution. With that, you need to define those outcomes that you expect and the results that you need to see in numbers. And that translates into figuring out what are your overarching metrics, and then what are those supporting metrics that line up to those overarching metrics as well. So you have a more robust measurement framework in place to actually measure the value against the outcomes that you're trying to achieve for your business. Typically, we see customers, in the CX/EX space looking at overarching metrics like resolution rate, CSAT, adheres to the solution, increasing self-service rate, and the cost to serve. Once you have those metrics defined, you also need to look at defining your solution with those metrics in mind. And every part of the solution that you're looking at should have a corresponding metric target. So for example, some of the more granular metrics that you might look at are response ratings. Are the responses that we're providing to our customers through our assistants actually good responses, and do our users find those helpful? Are the workflows and tasks that we're executing through our assistants, are they being successfully executed? What is the response accuracy score as well? So keep those in mind and make sure that you have your overarching metrics and your more detailed metrics that ladder up to those as well. So you're measuring throughout the solution.
Yeah, and so on oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kyrie.
Okay. The last piece that I want to make sure that we keep in mind here is that usage doesn't necessarily mean success. It is a good measure of, are people actually using the solution? But if you have a high usage solution, it may not necessarily mean that it's working well. It might mean that you've created a busy or unreliable system, especially if the assistant is frequently wrong, off policy, or frustrating. So it's important to keep those metrics in mind that help you actually measure the quality of those interactions as well. And make sure you're focusing on quality signals and metrics, not just vanity metrics.
And so for this slide that we're looking at, just to dive in a little bit further, when you evaluate thousands of AI initiatives, patterns emerge quickly, right? So my role, I'm on the front end talking to organizations about their tier one containment, or, a lot of the times the first thing that comes up is their knowledge is fragmented, right? That's where most of the things that in my experience, the conversations start with is, we have siloed data. It's in Salesforce. It's in our SharePoint. It's in multiple areas of the business and data silos, and it's fragmented, and they don't really know how to get started. And so most teams, they stop at, oh, this is interesting, but only few make it to impactful, because if you can't even start with knowledge and streamline and get that into a real smart AI ready way to utilize that across different delivery mechanisms, whether that's a chat or chat or a search agent or a voice agent, then that's when we start to see a lot of that 95%, or it could be 80%. Maybe we're, whether you're looking at the MIT, the publication that they used, or whether you're looking at the NTT data articles and metrics, it's somewhere in between 80 and 95 that you see that don't fail. Most of them really start to fail with just knowledge. I mean, that's really where it starts. But you also hear of some of the other things, such as, the governance is missing, right? That's where the 5%, they've kind of figured that out, or they've started to realize up front, hey, governance is super important. Hallucinations make outputs unreliable. If you're in financial institution, or if you're in government, right? hallucinations are not something that you can have whatsoever. It exposes you for reputational risk and other factors. Um, Risk teams tend to then shut things down. So if you're in a pilot, they start to see something hallucinate, or it's not finding the content because you have that siloed knowledge content buckets, and you don't get all of that information out, or it's not tagged, or you haven't used AI in the way that we do it in Benta the right way, then you can't answer those questions. You're seeing your conversion rates really low. So the 5% succeed because they solve these fundamentals. Once those foundations are set, scaling becomes manageable, becomes predictable, and it becomes safe. And so that's really where you start to see um, some of the others that are really using AI in what we feel like is the right way, and that's that 5% club. And so they kind of have to shift. You know, they stop asking how smart is the model. Instead, they ask how reliable is the system, right? And so that's the kind of things that you see what the winning 5% know that the others don't, right? And so as we transition to the next slide into what we see on knowledge management, I think I hit on that a little bit there, but just to kind of open that up a little bit more, this slide is the heart of the entire webinar, in my opinion, right? Enterprises don't fail because the model's bad. They fail because the model has nothing trustworthy to stand on. And so if your knowledge isn't governed, it's not explainable and structured, every agent you build inherits that chaos, right? It inherits a problem. And so, to be direct, LLMs cannot be your source of truth. Your knowledge system must be, right? And so, again, going back to the key concept of start with your knowledge base. That's what the 5% that are winning are doing. So, in regulated environments, this becomes a non negotiable. If your agent can't show its source, show its policy gate, or an audit trail, the conversation ends, not with your customer, but with your compliance officer. It ends there. And so, I'll let Kyrie cover, some of, how you make the knowledge work, because again, I'm on the front end. I hear what's breaking. I hear what the problems are. Kyrie is the one that is in our product that she's producing things that fix those in our world. And she helps somewhat we refer to as those 5%. So I'll let Kyrie dive into some of those other subjects.
The core message that we really want you to take away here is that the top performers treat knowledge as their control plane, and that is the foundation that every agent or assistant runs on. LLMs alone don't understand the DNA of your business. You understand the DNA of your business. You have that information, that data, the verifiable facts that you need to infuse throughout your AI solution to make sure that it's working. LLMs are powerful, but they can't avoid those hallucinations and inconsistencies in responses. And if you have a solution that's not grounded in verifiable facts, it's at best doing guesswork. And that's really where the risk lies. The core thing that we're focused on here at Inbenta, and something that I encourage you all to think about, is the concept of knowledge engineering, which is the process of extracting, structuring, and encoding your business's expert knowledge into a governed knowledge base so that AI can actually work off of that and solve responses and solve problems reliably. Now, what that actually looks like is being able to connect to a variety of different data sources, building an ingestion pipeline, which is something that we're working on, and we have one of the best ones out there, and extracting that information and building a structured knowledge base from your sources of truth, which can be verified policies, operational processes, and they may live in different systems, but you need a way to extract that information, bring it all together, and make it ready for AI to leverage in an effective way. The other piece of this is there are customer-specific terms that LLMs don't necessarily understand. And it's important to make sure that you're infusing that knowledge into whatever solution you're building as well, so that it becomes part of your AI solution's DNA and improves accuracy of understanding. Now, I'll give you an example here. We have an assist product here at Inbenta, and in a regular contextual sentence, assist means something very different than if you're talking about assist as a product of Inbenta. And that's very important context for your AI solution to have to understand what a user is asking about, especially if it's something unique to your business.
Yeah, and something to add on to that, in that same sentiment, when you think of tier one containment for, say, a call center. This is something right now that I can't emphasize enough, is that call center cost for a consumer calling in to change passwords and things like that for tier one containment. The biggest, hottest item right now that we're seeing for solution is an AI voice agent, right? It is near zero latency. It's multilingual. But if you're using LLMs or Gen AI in that capacity, who knows what that voice agent could say? I mean, there's no guardrails. I mean, there's really no sense to understand it. So if you use your knowledge engineering the right way, and this is why knowledge engineering is replacing prompt engineering, is that you look at the LLMs, you use them for embeddings, and then you're getting those answers from, say, a voice agent, from your content. It's not drifting, it's not hallucinating. And that is super important because when you think about a voice agent, that's where the market's going. If anybody's wondering right now, it is heated and moving in that direction super quickly. You've got a lot of great technology out there, in the way of voice, and that's right now what most consumers prefer. They don't want to text, they don't want to chat, they want to speak to something, and whether that's STTTTS or whether that's an actual virtual voice agent, it better be using your content alone to be able to answer those questions and not drift. And so, that's again, just to emphasize what Kyrie said on the assist, and then to emphasize on the voice. If you want a demo of ours, it's great. That's wonderful. We can do that for you. But enterprises need repeatability, they need auditability, and they need consistency. And that happens only when knowledge becomes a governed asset. And so, to kind of segue into the next slide is, where do LLMs really belong, right? I'll let Kyrie kind of give it the explanation that we look at here of LLMs being a translator versus your truth engine. So I'll let her kind of talk about that, and then I have some closing comments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. LLMs are everywhere, but success isn't really about the access to the LLMs, and it's about how you use them to drive value for your business. And LLMs alone, again, you can't control those hallucinations. And Jeff was talking a little bit about voice. And one of the key things that consumers are looking for are really consistency in the experiences across channels, which is very difficult to achieve with a system that's not controllable. So accuracy and traceability aren't optional from a compliance perspective, but repeatability and reliability are also important from a consumer expectations perspective when you're trying to meet the expectations of consumers who access your solution from different channels. The key message here for where LLMs belong are really that they're great at interpreting human language and facilitating natural conversation, but they should never be your source of truth. So think of LLMs as your translator, not as your truth engine. The approach that we take here at Inbenta is we're leveraging them for embeddings and interpreting human language because that's what they're really good at. And in real time to triage what a user's true intent is so that we can understand what the user is asking for if the intent is unclear. And then once we have that clarity, we can reliably serve them verified content from a governed knowledge base so that they know that they're getting the same consistent response to that particular item that they're looking for every single time. And your business can trust that if a user is asking the same type of question, they're going to receive the same content that's verified and grounded in factual data. The core things I want you to take away from here from a design principle standpoint are number one, keep your facts, rules, and actions in governed systems. And two, leverage LLMs for understanding and response. Many businesses already have your sources of truth for where you keep your information, even if those are siloed across ticketing platforms, SharePoints, or other systems. Some of the key themes that we heard back at TSIA in October was many businesses have their data hung up in ticketing platforms, SharePoints, Google Drives, or other systems, and it's very difficult to tap into that siloed data and structure it in a way to make it work for an AI solution. That's why I'd recommend that you consider a solution or a partner who already has a built-in knowledge engineering system and can tap into the different data sources that you have and meet you where you are at from a data perspective and unlock that value for you in your AI solution. And that way you can ingest your data from where it already lives, transform it into an AI-ready knowledge base, and make that work with an intelligent system to retrieve reliable results in a meaningful way. The other piece of the puzzle here is if you have a system that can work with your existing data sources, is to focus on something that can continuously refresh those sources based on when they're being updated in the sources of truth systems, so that your AI-ready knowledge base is consistently synchronized with that underlying data. And if you're able to do this, that really creates control and precision by design. You can have consistent decisions, explainable outcomes, and virtually zero hallucinations. And that's really how you scale safely. Jeff, what are some of your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think we're kind of hitting on this pretty hard, but I think the general thesis is LLMs are extraordinary at understanding intent, but they're not trustworthy decision makers. The moment that you ask an LLM to be your source of truth, you introduce risk, variance, and unpredictability. The 5% treat LLMs the right way as interpreters, not judges. When the LLM handles, language and your system handles truth, governance, and actions, you achieve reliability. And that's when AI becomes scalable, right? And so, to dovetail on what Kyrie said about, TSIA, I can't say enough how knowledge is really the pillar of it, and then the rest is just the deliverable mechanisms, right? Is it voice? Is it a chat? Is it search, right? What we call an expanded agent. Um, but what you see in the market, or what we were told at TSIA, is that what most organizations are experiencing are vendors in the market that are wrapping LLMs around a service. And that's kind of what we're double clicking on here. That's what we're trying to say, is that you really need to understand your partner if they're not transparent and showing you how they're going to orchestrate that. You really need to dive in and understand if they're just using LLMs, you're going to be starting over. Another thing that we haven't really touched on is model drift, right? If you look at OpenAI, and Merlin, our CTO, he's one of the smartest men in the world. Don't tell him that, because he's got, he'll take that and run with it. But he's great because he talks about model drift. When you look at OpenAI and you look at the different models that they have, if you build your system to one model, they abandon that model for the next model, and they have to keep up with compute. And so you're always chasing it, right? Even we talk about hallucination and all of that, but that's where your model drift, but also tech debt comes from. And so that's not something that we necessarily highlighted on this, but it's something that might segue into our next slide, which I'll let Kyrie talk about, is some of the orchestrations and the power of AI. But it's super important to understand that if you're leveraging some of those LLMs, I use the OpenAI, I'm not picking on them. They're all the same. You can use Anthropic. Anthropic does some things that are better than OpenAI. And you could go on down the list. But the problem is that you're always model chasing, and it can create some tech debt. So it's good for efficacy in the market to understand, what exactly an LLM can do for you. And we feel we're turning it on its head. We're using it in different ways. And so to segue into that, on our next slide, the power of AI orchestration. Kyrie can kind of cover some of the things that we're going to talk about, which is retrieval, reasoning, workflow execution, decision frameworks, and how the 5% orchestrate everything cohesively.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give a little bit of context around where we're seeing the market right now, which is we're seeing the market is split. We see that, on one side, businesses are looking at pure Gen AI solutions, which promise speed and adaptability, but they don't provide the level of control that enterprises need, and therefore it introduces risk. On the other side, we're seeing conversational AI solutions, which offer reliability, but those are slow and rigid, and neither of those really solve the full problem. And so what's really important, I want you to take away from this conversation, is that the 5% don't rely on one model, one tool, or one tactic. They understand the benefits of leveraging different techniques and how to bring those together and orchestrate them to deliver on the desired business outcomes. Something that we've been very focused on, and something that we'll be launching as part of our new Encore platform in 2026, is a new concept called programmed intelligence. And we've developed a new approach orchestrating several of the techniques that are on this slide that I'll talk about, which is called programmed intelligence. And that's what our Encore platform will run on. And what programmed intelligence is, it blends knowledge engineering, intelligent AI automation, the conversational quality of modern assistants with a minimal human oversight. And what that really does is it bridges the gap to give you the speed and adaptability that you need as a business with the reliability and control that you need. And it's grounded on these three pillars that you see here on the slide. Talked a lot about knowledge. It's really, really important to ground your solution in trusted facts and make sure that you're encoding that business expertise and verified data into an AI-ready knowledge base so that you can actually retrieve meaningful, accurate information. So take away that, it's best to look for a solution and partner that can take your data, meet you where you are, make it AI ready so that you can retrieve that information in a meaningful way. LLMs, we just talked a little bit about those as well. They're great for interpreting language and facilitating natural conversation. That's what we leverage them for as well. Jeff talked a little bit about model drift, and the takeaway that I have for the audience here is to make sure that you're leveraging multiple models, that you can plug them in and leveraging them for their strengths. Different models are good at different things, and you need to be aware of that. So either have the in-house expertise to test and verify and continuously understand which models to be using in different ways, or choose a partner with strong AI expertise that will take care of that heavy lifting for you and make sure that your solution is performing as expected and you're not seeing any degradation in your solution's performance due to model drift. And the third thing is rules and workflows. This is really important for compliance and repeatability. So consider leveraging NLP for contextual understanding and matching intelligence so that you're getting reliable, repeatable results. This is something that we're also focused on and building into kind of a hybrid model where we're leveraging these three tactics as well. We have a matching algorithm that will match the content in that knowledge base once we understand a user's true intent so that you always get that piece of content surfaced when a user asks about a particular topic. So you can guarantee that that's going to be the result and there are no hallucinations. And the second piece of this is to implement any operational guardrails for your agents so that you can keep them predictable. And what that means is really limiting the actions, what they can and can't take, and where you want humans to intervene. This hybrid design is going to help you deliver explainable, auditable automation that scales safely. And again, like we mentioned earlier, it's going to help you provide consistency across channels and languages, especially as you're looking to support a global audience and you're looking to deliver consistent messages and information to your users across all the different channels that they may be interacting with your business.
So yeah, so for me, this slide, this is a slide that separates amateurs from professionals in AI. I mean, when you talk about enterprises no longer asking which model should we use, it's orchestrating a combination of models to Kyrie's point, and so that's the operating pattern of the 5%, and it's why their systems are explainable and trustworthy from day one. Not 2 years down the road when they have aggregated multiple AI vendors, they've plateaued, they've tried to build it themselves and find themselves drifting or in tech debt, all the things that we've covered to this stage. So the next slide is so what's your playbook to join the 5% club, right? The reason that we kind of put this together is that this playbook respects how enterprises actually operate, right? It's the understanding of what is the infrastructure. You don't need 20 use cases to prove AI works. We've seen that, right? Everybody wants to start. I think that was the biggest thing with Gen AI, right? Slap it on, set it, and forget it. That is not the way AI works. It is not a product. It's a service. So, you have to treat it that way. And so you need one well-governed use case with measurable outcomes. Start there, and that's kind of what we want to outline for the playbook for you today and get you at a good starting point. Because the winning organizations, you want to start small, one use case, one domain, start with your knowledge layer, and then focus on your knowledge, connect your data, apply guardrails, deploy orchestration. And then obviously the step 3 is measure, publish, and scale that. Early wins build momentum, right? So again, If you start small, you don't rely on just Gen AI. You talk about some look at the orchestration that we've talked about. Again, going back to knowledge being the most important. But if you do these things, you can scale that across your organization. And I think it's just been done backwards when you look at it, right? Everybody thought Gen AI and just say and spray it, right? And then just let it go. And that's definitely not what we're seeing works for the 5%. So this is a good model, and I'll let Kyrie kind of talk about the implementation details because that's not it's kind of a 10,000-foot view what I was speaking to and what you see in the three pillars or three steps here. Kyrie can really talk about the implementation efforts and details around what that means.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a few closing points here, and then we'll also make sure that we leave time to answer any of the questions for the audience here. When starting small, what I'd say is pick one use case and one audience that you want to target for that use case, because that helps you keep the complexity low and make sure that you can validate that impact early. But before you even start that, make sure that the right governance is in place to validate the solution meets your organizational standards for safety, compliance, and business value, and that you have your measurement framework in place to actually validate that the solution is working. Second piece, this is fundamental. Focus on building the knowledge foundation. Make sure that you're looking into a solution or partner that has that knowledge engineering system that you can leverage so that you can make your existing data work for you. And make sure that you're picking those data sources that are going to help you meet the needs of the audience for that use case. That's going to make it a lot more manageable for you to validate the results early on. From a measurement and scaling perspective, I'd recommend you pick one pilot group to test and measure those results. Again, that's going to make it a lot more manageable, and it will help you build those early proof points to unlock buy-in and budget. And then you can gradually broaden the reach of your audience and include more and more knowledge layers that you can continue to iteratively validate. And the last piece of advice that I'll leave you with is to choose a solution and partner that once you've built that buy-in and you have those proof points for your solution, that solution or partner will help you scale quickly. We see a lot of companies get stuck once they get to pilot, and it's very difficult to scale. But it's important to keep that big picture in mind as well, because you want to get to production quickly and you want to be able to scale that solution across your enterprise. So think broader than that one use case as well. Think about how you're going to scale in the future, how you can validate and iterate fast and expand without losing control.
Yeah, and so
Pass it
once
back to you, Jeff, to close us
yeah,
out.
so one, this is what 5%, right? Roughly five, call it 5, 10%. This is what they're doing. So once you run this once and you prove it, and everything changes. You never build AI the old way again. So lead the future, don't chase it. Chasing AI trends is expensive, whether it's aggregating vendors, or whether it's trying to build it yourself and then stalling, or spinning out of control in some cases. And it's unpredictable. We talked about that. Building a governed AI system, is durable, it's scalable, and future proof. So, the companies that are leading the future, they're not reacting to the hype. They're operationalizing AI, and it has discipline and measurable outcomes. And so, moving to the next piece is joining the 5% club. This is a moment where organizations decide which group, which group they'll belong to, right? Will you be in the 5-10%, or will you continue to stay in that 80, 85, 90%? And so, that's the biggest differentiator, is that we should be seeing at this point in AI a bigger group fall into that 5 or 10% group. And we feel like this is the playbook and the outline and pillars that we've seen that work. And so the 5%, they've made that choice, and they've seen those ROIs. And so just to recap, we will be sharing this deck with you all after this webinar. And so we can also now move into Q&A. I want to leave that time and go over some questions that the group might have. I'll answer what I can, and if they're technical, I'm definitely going to field those to Kyrie. So we can go ahead and open it up for Q&A for the group. So feel free to chime in. Anyone wants to drop anything in the QA, can field
We're happy to
those.
answer anything.
I'm sorry.
We're happy to answer anything that's on anyone's mind. We'll give everyone a minute to think.
A lot of information, but a lot of good information. No questions from the group? We are around to answer any questions. Obviously, if you are on this webinar, you know who Inbenta is by this point. We have a consultative approach, so we're happy to speak with anybody. If you want to learn more, we would be more than happy to assess your AI readiness or designing an operating pattern that works for you. Our team would be happy to connect to show you any demos or anything like that. But again, I'll give it a few more minutes before we close out just to see if there was any Q&A. It looks like there might be one that came in.
We've got two questions. We've got one around how do we attribute success directly to the AI system versus other operational changes? Which is a great question. I can answer that first, and then Jeff will let you answer that based on what you've seen out in the market. The first thing I say is make sure that you build a measurement framework that directly tracks the metrics that you can attribute to your AI solution. So for example, if you want to understand customer satisfaction, it's looking at those detailed level metrics that could be ratings data, for example, that's specifically tied to the responses that your assistant is providing. Or it could be user sentiment scores based on, how your users might be responding to whatever your assistant is telling them as well. So that piece of the puzzle is making sure that you have metrics incorporated into your measurement framework that allow you to directly assess the effectiveness of your AI system as well. And then the other side of the coin is making sure that if you're making other operational changes, you're also identifying what metrics you are tracking that can be attributable directly to those changes separately as well. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for me it's super simple, and I know it's not, but it is because when you look at conversion rates and degradation, it really is blatantly obvious. If you start out with a system and you have a conversion rate of say, and this was shocking to me, I heard this at TSIA, an organization might say, well, if we get to 50%, then we're good. That's unbelievable. And then you have degradation as part of that when maybe out of the box or out of the gate they start at 50% and they see degradation, it starts to go down. That's a huge issue. Or you might see that it just plateaus and never gets any better than that 50%, right? AI should learn. It should get better. Again, it goes back to your orchestration model and some of the things that Kyrie has touched on, and she's seen on her side through the implementations. But it's super easy when someone comes to us and says, "Well, how does your pilot program work?" Because they're concerned about, hey, can you give us 120 days to see if this works? That goes into conversion rates and degradation, right? They're worried about, does this work in the first place right out of the gate once we build it? We don't want to pay you first and then we release it and realize it's no good. Or we don't want to pay you and after 30 or 45 days, we see it starts to get worse. And so, when you start to attribute success directly to the AI system, you should have visibility to those metrics, which not everybody does. But you also want to be able to gauge that from day one and follow it as you watch those models and what you consider success, right? Some consider success at 50%. That's unfortunate, but some maybe that's good enough. And it's good that they set a success metric, but in our world, we see 75, 85% as being just a standard, and then the high 90 percentile being where everybody else should be. Um, and so I think that's my take on that.
Totally agreed.
Looks like have another one here. What's the best first use case for an enterprise that wants to start small but show early wins? Um, I can start, but Kyrie, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to dive in?
Go ahead. I'll add on to it.
So the best first use case that I've seen, a lot of people, if you look back to 2015, a lot of people started with a chatbot, right? Because that was the low hanging fruit, right? Changing a password, things like that. But most of the time, even in today's world, in 2025, that technology is stale. So start with the most common area where you have maybe tier one containment where people are asking, hey, can I change a password? Engage whether that's working or not, right? And if that is, if you feel like your 50% containment's good enough, maybe that's working for you. I would say the second or equivalent to that would be internal use cases. How easy is it for maybe one area to access data within your organization? That seems to be a big use case, especially if you're in a highly regulated environment. If you're a financial institution and you're an agent that needs access to internal data quickly to answer a consumer query, or if you are a credit bureau and you need to handle a time sensitive query, which you could be fined if you get outside of certain timelines. You need access to data very quickly. That typically lies in one area, and that should be fairly easily to take and ingest data assets and be able to expose that content, and use Gen AI for content gaps, and then gauge your metrics from there and your success rates. And so typically it's still, even today, because again, a lot of people started with Gen AI, or basic technology, chatbots from 2015 that didn't have dynamic data assets ingested to use for higher conversion rates, to make those a really good experience. Start with your tier one containment, or start with an area of the business internal that needs access to data very quickly.
Yeah, I 100% agree. From an internal perspective, that's the lowest risk approach that you can take. So if you're more risk averse, starting internally is a great first use case. And then looking externally with the tier one containment use case is a great approach as well. And I'd recommend looking at focusing on that with a small pilot group of trusted users and gathering their feedback and validating the results with them, which will help you manage your risk as well as you start small. And then once you build that confidence in your solution, you can easily scale.
Absolutely. I just wanted to iterate again, if anyone needs help assessing your AI readiness, or where you're at in conjunction to this playbook that we've shared, and some of the thought leadership that we've shared today from our own experience, we'd be more than happy to help designing your operating patterns. Our team would be happy to connect with you. One last question before we drop. What does a knowledge control plane look like in practice, and what systems do we need to support it? I'll kick that one to Kyrie.
All right. In terms of a knowledge control plane, what this effectively means is being able to, again, take your data and extract it from different sources and prepare it into an AI-ready format. This is something that we're currently focused on doing with our ingestion pipeline, where we can connect to various different data sources, extract that data, structure it, and what our output looks like is an intent base that has questions and answer pairs, and then those are tied back to the sources of information where those question and answer pairs were derived. And that's effectively our knowledge control plane, which allows users to then go in and verify that that information is correct before it's surfaced up through an assistant interface. And this is something that will be introduced as part of our Encore solution as well, coming out in 2026. The second piece of the question, what systems do we need to support it? I look for a solution that has a built-in knowledge engineering system, which then allows you to leverage your existing data in a meaningful way. So a solution or a partner who can really meet you where you are and has that system in place is going to make it a lot easier and faster for you to unlock the value of your data for an AI solution.
Great questions.
Agreed.
All right.
Okay.
And again, if you want to learn more, feel free to reach out. We have been around a long time, and we would love to help you or your organization answer any questions that you have. We would love to help you succeed with AI. and some of the fundamentals that we talked about today. That's what the 5 or 10%. That's what they're doing, and they're succeeding, and we're seeing them really automate a lot of their workflows, and that's what AI was intended for. That's what we're here to do. So thank you all again for listening to us for these 45 minutes, and hopefully you gained something from it. We look forward to hearing from you, and hopefully this has helped you out in some way on your AI journey. Thank you all.
Thank you all.